What is complex trauma or CPTSD? Complex PTSD or complex trauma is trauma that starts or happens in childhood. It's relational, occurring in relationships, usually some of the most important ones, and developmental, happening during the formative years of childhood. Complex trauma is usually recurring, happens more than once, and is inflicted by a caregiver, parent, guardian, or person who has close, repeated contact, like a clergy person, neighbor, or family member. Complex trauma can consist of emotional, physical, and/or sexual violence. Every time I use the term trauma survivor, I use it to encompass all types of trauma. Complex trauma, single incident trauma, the list goes on. But in reality, most of my clients are complex trauma survivors, those with CPTSD, and are the people I'm most often talking to and about. It's so important to take the mystery out of this disorder and make it concrete by talking more openly about CPTSD. We'll look at what CPTSD is, what causes it, and what it looks like in adulthood, and how we can understand it better and talk about it. What makes CPTSD so hard to recognize? Because it happens in the formative years, complex trauma impacts your ability to understand and maintain emotional stability. You may struggle to find a sense of safety and trust throughout your life, and therefore it is difficult to regulate emotions in relationships. Complex trauma may lead to a disorganized attachment style, where you struggle to know whether what you think and feel is right or wrong. Standing up for yourself and setting boundaries may feel completely unfamiliar. It's often hard to figure out who to trust, if anyone, especially in relationships. In the struggle to make sense of why life feels so bad, those with CPTSD often fault themselves. Many feel intense shame and self-hatred because they can't seem to manage emotions like everybody else. It's hard to untangle one's trauma from one's identity. That's the complex piece. What causes CPTSD? Complex trauma comes from a history of living with abuse or neglect from those who were supposed to protect and maintain your safety. It changes the way you view life. It can leave an imprint on your nervous system, which is why a bottom-up approach to therapy is so important. Why a bottom-up approach to trauma therapy is so powerful. There are numerous approaches to psychotherapy. I've studied many. Because there is never a one-size-fits-all approach, I integrate many therapeutic approaches into my work with clients. One thing I can say for sure is that in my experience a bottom-up approach to therapy works better in trauma-informed care. Yeah, definitely I can say that too, from experience. In my experience, it is the best all-encompassing approach to help create healing and lasting change in a person's ability to think, feel, and find healthier ways to live after trauma. What does top-down and bottom-up therapy refer to? The terms top-down and bottom-up refer to the general areas of the brain and where you start in therapy, from the top or the bottom. Different parts of the brain work together to help us use information to survive and thrive in the world. When we talk about a top-down approach, we're focused on starting therapy with the parts of the brain we associate with thinking, speaking, and current emotional awareness. These are the topmost areas of the brain and include the neocortex, frontal lobes, and prefrontal lobes. And the problem is, in trauma, very often the prefrontal cortex area is impaired. So, talk therapy is not really very helpful and sometimes can re-traumatize you. You really have to work with the nervous system first. When we talk about the bottom-up approach, we're talking about starting therapy with parts of the brain located toward the base. These are the brainstem areas responsible for reflexes, memories, and automatic survival responses. This area also has a role in learning. What is a bottom-up approach? The bottom-up approach begins with information acquired from the body's sensations. The bottom-up approach accepts that feelings or even body sensations happen first. The body's automatic responses or feelings happen, feelings that one is unsafe. The life-saving stress response that has people looking and acting dysregulated is noticed. Trauma-informed therapy creates healing relationship in which it is safe to begin to look at the reasons why a person feels unsafe and unable to control thoughts and feelings when triggered, without being overwhelmed. The healing relationships include the therapist-client relationship and the client's own relationship with himself or herself. The best modalities from bottom-up therapy incorporate dual awareness, thinking and feeling, that is necessary for healing. In order to heal, feeling safe and learning how to have regulated responses in both the body and the brain need to develop. Bottom-up therapy integrates the whole brain, left, right, top, and bottom. Integration is key to healthy regulation. Strengths of the bottom-up approach. In bottom-up therapy, we don't just focus on the primal part of the brain. Simply feeling one's trauma-charged feelings, that is actually not enough to heal the injuries to the nervous system. It can actually be re-traumatizing to just feel the feelings and not do anything with them. Trauma-informed therapy with a bottom-up approach allows a person to explore the dysregulated feelings after safety and stabilization are built and felt. Safety and stability allows a person to have one foot in feelings, right side of the brain or the bottom, and one foot in logic, the here and now, the present, the frontal lobe, left side or top. Using both sensation and thinking to process trauma helps a person realize that the danger they are responding to is actually old. Clients can begin to develop awareness that puts the danger in the past. they can experience feeling safe now. They can develop dual awareness, that they are able to keep themselves safe in the current situation, and look back on what has happened in the past. This healing process allows a sense of safety in the present day to nurture a sense of safety for the younger parts of the self that otherwise only know danger as ever present. The frontal lobe needs to be on board, to integrate with the lower parts of the brain, to make sense of the feelings. In my view, a bottom-up approach is asking, why are you doing this behavior? There must be a reason. What happened to you? It's saying, what is the root cause, so we can address and resolve it? As we detail on our website, using a strengths-based trauma-informed model of care, our approach accept a person as is. It recognizes the desperation and extreme states of emotion that unhealed trauma creates, and affirms their need for care and resources. This perspective does not ask what is wrong with you, asks what happened to you and how did you survive, affirms your behavior makes sense. Emotions can be, and in fact probably are, mostly processed at an unconscious level. We become conscious and aware of all this after the fact, says researcher Joseph Ledoux, about emotional regulation taking place from the bottom up. In Anxious, using the brain to understand and treat fear and anxiety. According to Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, the state of the nervous system influences healthy or unhealthy social behavior. Bottom-up therapy addresses the trauma response in the body. As I mentioned in my recent article, The Body Remembers Trauma, sometimes a trauma survivor may be exhibiting body sensations or reactions to trauma without being able to name the trauma. Sometimes a situation triggers a person's trauma response without them being aware of it. The individual just feels a threat to their safety. They then begin to find ways to cope with those feelings. These become usually deeply ingrained coping mechanisms that were developed long ago when the trauma first happened in their life. Perhaps the person is using a coping mechanism, binging, smoking, self-harm, or using drugs or alcohol, because they don't want to feel what they're feeling. With a bottom-up approach to therapy, we help that person find new skills so that feelings feel more manageable. Until a person can learn to be present and in their body and feel their feelings safely, it's impossible to truly process trauma. Why we use bottom-up therapy first. First, the body reacts, then the mind thinks. It can be hard to know you're safe when the amygdala, the smoke alarm in your brain, is blaring. The part of the brain that develops earliest in life is the primitive brain, the brainstem. It is the part of the brain that is responsible for keeping us safe. It is where fight, flight, and freeze exist. The primitive part of the brain does not suddenly just turn off when it had long-standing danger. After trauma, especially complex or developmental trauma, the brain gets stuck in this mode and remains prepared for danger all the time. The higher brain regions, the limbic system responsible for attachment and emotional development, and the cortical brain responsible for thinking, learning and inhibiting, do not develop as needed, nor can they work well if the lower part of the brain, the part responsible for sensory motor functions and survival, are not functioning well. In my experience, you cannot change your thoughts long-term about anything without first noticing the feelings that triggers the thought and working to address it from the primal part of the brain, the limbic system, where the trauma is stored. Makes sense, right?
What is limbic system therapy and how is it useful in the treatment of trauma? According to Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, most interventions that he recommends for working with trauma fall within the category of limbic system therapy. Here, Bessel describes how we can conceptualize the limbic system and why it's crucial to focus on these particular areas of the brain and body when working with trauma.
There's a metaphor I like to use, in that so much of trauma is in the limbic system, or what people used to call the limbic system, in that all these areas of the brain have to do with danger, safety, perception of the world get changed. So basically, most of the therapies that I'm advocating here is limbic system therapy. It's not about understanding or figuring things out, because that's not really where the trauma sits. Trauma sits in your automatic reactions and your dispositions and how you interpret the world. So in order to really rewire those automatic perceptions, you need to have deep experiences that for your survival brain contradicts how you are now disposed to think.
Bessel just mentioned the limbic system. Broadly speaking, it's the emotional part of the brain. It contains both the hippocampus and the amygdala. The hippocampus is associated with memory, and the amygdala is involved in detecting threat. Now, you might have noticed that he said what people used to call the limbic system. That's because there's some question about whether or not it's still useful to think of all the parts of the brain that make up the limbic system as a unified system. However, what's important to take away here is this. Trauma doesn't necessarily live in the part of the brain that's concerned with reason and insight. It inhabits the parts that shape our temperament, the way we understand the world, and our automatic reactions. So when we target the part of the brain that's feeling and reacting automatically, when we create a new experience that contradicts the lesson that that part of the brain has learned from trauma, that can change the way a person with a trauma history is wired to respond. So what does it look like to have an experience like that? An experience that rewires the brain?
For example, if you grow up thinking that you're helpless and that anybody can do anything to you unless you yell at them, that becomes your disposition. But now, if you take a martial art course, you get to deeply feel like, wow, I can kick anybody in the groin at any time if I feel like it, and I can protect myself. And if you have experienced that, of becoming a martial artist, then that feeling of I'm always helpless will dramatically change. You cannot do that abstractly. And so you need to have experiences that directly contradict how your body is disposed. And we should have experiences like that in every mental health center. That is limbic system therapy.
Is what does my nervous system need in this moment to feel nourished? What does my nervous system need in order to feel like it can come to ventral or stay in ventral a bit longer? Because it is only from ventral that we have the capacity to really explore options, make choices, connect with others, to feel common humanity. Those experiences to find solutions to where we are and to move forward, those only come from a ventral state. So we're really needing to find ways to nourish our nervous system. Social connection now comes in lots of forms that it, we may not have appreciated a month ago. Email, text, emoji conversations, standing outside and having conversations across your front yard. There are all ways that people are creatively trying to stay in connection. And the question really is, what's my personal connection plan, right? Because what works for someone else may not work for me.
How clients experience the bottom-up approach. Once you begin to understand how you feel about something, you can start to change the way you think about it. But it is way more. It is so much more. So many years ago, I had cognitive behavioral therapy for about a year. I was around age 19, 20 something. And I was, for one, just very shy back then, and I had trouble talking anyway. So I was at a disadvantage, and sometimes we just sat there, not talking, and I had to pay for the lesson. Seriously. It was kind of a waste of time, to a big part, because after that I still got into a bad relationship. And I still got into a cult. So, this shouldn't have happened. But because my nervous system was still dysregulated, this is why that happened. You are like a magnet to predators. When you are in this state and don't know how to draw boundaries and say no. I didn't know that at the time. Now I know a bit better. But why? I have worked with a somatic experience therapist around 2018-19. Also for a little bit more than a year, but then I ran out of money and couldn't pay it anymore. But this is the best form of therapy I have ever experienced. And you feel it, that shift in your body. It really works. This is such a great therapy. And it changes you, and then suddenly you have a different approach to life. And I wish they would not push the stupid cognitive behavioral therapy. This is so outdated. You need to address the nervous system and the limbic system and work with the body, not just cognitively. So the top-down approach is only changing your thoughts. So you see, this is a problem, because when your body reacts before you even think about something, changing your thoughts will really not work. That's common sense, because your body is reacting to a threat. So it's not about changing your thoughts, it's changing your sense for being safe, You need to feel safe. So basically you retrain the way you perceive threat, and this is not cognitively alone. If you have a flashback, it just goes boom, and you're in the flashback. And then everything happens at once. It's a physical response to threat. Okay?
But the stress response you feel when you are late to work, or the growl your stomach makes when you haven't had anything but an energy bar and coffee in the morning, is the same stress response we had when we were cavemen. That stress response is called fight or flight. Grunk is a real-life caveman. He goes to work hunting saber-tooths and rabbits for his family. Unfortunately, the saber-tooth chases Grunk on occasion, and his physical and emotional stress levels go way up. When this happens, Grunk's body's intelligence kicks in to help him escape. His heart rate goes way up, his blood pressure spikes, more adrenaline is produced, and the body moves the blood away from the digestive tract and into the muscles, as digesting food isn't a priority at that moment. Grunk eventually does escape and rests at home, and after 15 to 20 minutes, his body resets and begins to operate normally again. Now, your body doesn't know the difference between running from a saber-toothed tiger or rushing your kids to school. Your body's stress response is triggered in both situations, so your blood pressure, heart rate, and food digestion is the same as Grunk's when he's running away from a tiger. These types of situations could happen every day in our culture. The difference between you and the caveman is the caveman was able to relax in his cave soon after he finished stressing out. So for the whole day, the caveman would stress the duration of a hunt, which would last maybe an hour. You, on the other hand, have to deal with the stress of racing your kids to school, traffic, work, relationships, and everything else that life constantly throws at you. Plus, add in the constant chemical stress that comes from the unhealthy foods we eat, and it's like you are running from the saber-tooth all day long. The solution is to build your own cave. You have to build your own cave every day, and it means finding some peace in the pileup of traffic while driving to work. It means going to bed on time instead of staying up late binging on your favorite TV shows. It means taking some time to go outside and do some relaxing work instead of locking yourself up in your office. Otherwise, this chronic stress will open you up to most diseases because your immune system will tank and a lack of nutrients that your body needs due to not being able to digest your food properly. Add to that the fact that your adrenals, which are the glands that sit atop your kidney and decide where your hormones go, are so active with the abundance of stress you experience and put into your body, you will develop adrenal fatigue. Put all this together, and now you know why stress is the start of all disease processes. How can we make our fight or flight more effective? How can we turn it off when we don't need it and bring it up when it's necessary? Ask yourself what you are putting in your body for energy. Your body is probably asking your brain for those artificial stimulants you gave it, like coffee, processed sugars, or genetically modified foods, because it's confused on why the adrenals aren't filling up like they used to. You have sucked your adrenals dry of hormones that didn't need to be active in the first place. That's huge because we are taking a finite source and sucking it dry. What people may not know is that a lot of things trigger the fight or flight response. Emotional stresses, eating unhealthy foods, overreacting to life's daily challenges, going through tough emotional times, all trigger fight or flight. However, that leaves a lot of areas where we can improve it.
Temple Grandin is America's most famous autistic, yet she's a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. She designed much of this feedlot, and it's estimated that 50% of all livestock in America.
If I just sit really quietly and I don't stare at them, see if I stare at them, they won't come up to me. I've got to make myself little. If I stand up, I'm more scary. Now, if I lay down, I could probably get them all licking me. Maybe I'll do that. That guy. Just let him come up to me, and I don't look him in the eye because he doesn't like that. Well, they're an animal where fear is their main emotion, and fear is also my main emotion. Move simply by walking back by them. You just walk back by them, and they go right up to shoot. Just walk back by them. When you cross their shoulder, they'll go forward. The mistake that a lot of people make when they handle cattle is they poke at them and prod at them way too much.
Temple has become a byword for the humane treatment of cattle. She's always found it much easier to understand cows than people. Her mind blindness saves her from reading too much into a cow's mind. She simply observes their behavior. Some years ago, she noticed that when cattle were held in the grip of the restraining bars for the vets to do their work, they changed from being fearfully aroused to being docile. She decided to see if hard hugging would work for her.
I'll demonstrate how the squeeze machine works. Get in here on my hands and knees. Take through here. This. Forward by operating this lever. When I was a little kid, I would get in under the sofa cushions so that I found that calmed me down. Built my first prototype of it back in high school and was so anxious all the time I just couldn't stand it. It was like, felt like I was in a room with a lion chasing me around, and my nervous system was just in full activation, fight or flight. I was desperate for relief, and I found that if I used a squeezing machine, that helped to calm down my nerves. It makes me have calm and gentle thoughts. Sort of like gets the right neurotransmitters going that have calm and nice feelings, rather than not so nice feelings.
So I can very much relate to how you would want to regulate your nervous system to calm down. And I have my own methods. Possibly that squeezing machine, I don't know if that would work for myself, because even weighted blankets, I absolutely hate when there is too much weight pushing down on me. That will trigger rage, which is the fight response. However, this exercise with a deflated ball is very relaxing. It hydrates the psoas and therefore is regulating the nervous system, calming down a stress response. This is very helpful. Being in such a narrow confinement, even if I can control it, I would have to test it if this would work, or if it would cause some more stress. I don't know. Because even if there is demand pressure, it will cause a lot of stress. So all kinds of pressure. I need to have a choice in it. Agency. This is so important to me. So, I can relate to a lot of that, but then also I have my own issues which come from PTSD, and then I have to take those things into consideration, and my nervous system needs to feel safe. That's what it is about. Safety. Listen to what my nervous system is telling me.
Temple is 50 years old, has few friends, prefers to talk shop, and has avoided the complications of sexual relationships all her life.
So for me, this is the same thing, but I had to learn that the hard way by experiencing it, and it had quite bad consequences, me saying no. Not everybody can understand when you are just not interested.
I happen to be blessed with autism. I do not get embarrassed. I do not get self-conscious. I'm not in the slightest bit nervous about doing this because I don't have that social awareness that I understand you guys have. This little box here isn't talk notes or anything boring or sensible, perhaps I should say like that. No, this is comfort objects. It is security objects. This is how I'm able to come out of my little autism paradise called my home into this unpredictability. I've never been to this place before. This is not what I do on a Saturday morning. I mean, I've been made very aware of these signs in sports centres that say the management have the right to refuse admission. Now, my house is for me, my flappies and my ice skates, not some horrible, body who will move, my stack of papers that I've stacked up behind in my hall and things like that. Not just my home is for me, my flappies and my ice skates, but my bed is for me, my flappies and my ice skates. And then when I've had enough, just kick them out. I don't have to worry about making them breakfast or worrying whether whether everything's okay or whether I've performed well enough or what have you. They just satisfy my needs and that's enough. I found myself in situations where boys particularly have been asking me out to a pub or a snack bar or something, and I've gone along with that for practical reasons because I'm thirsty or because I'm hungry, and I had no idea because I couldn't read the innuendo, I guess, that's underneath, which is supposed to read, I like you, I'm interested in you, what do you think about me sort of thing. And I've got myself into quite coupley situations with boys, men, and they've asked me out to the cinema or something and sit in the back row, and someone told me relatively recently it was a turn on to licking each other's ears. I can't, I just think what a horrible fidgety carry on. I mean, you can't concentrate on the film for starters when all this is going on. You go to the cinema to see a film.
Exactly, I agree.
And I've got in quite a lot of trouble in a way with boys because of this, because when they've gone perhaps that little bit further on, I've sort of said, hang on a minute, I haven't got the time of day for this, not interested. They sort of say, well, why have you led us up the garden path and this sort of thing? And they get annoyed that I'm perhaps teasing them. When it's just not there. I was going because they asked me and they were just someone to go with and it satisfied my hunger or something.
Like the cows in the alien world of the stockyard, Temple has had to fight against the constant fear of living in the alien world of people whose desires, intentions and emotions are a complete mystery to her. She calls us emotibots and feels like Mr. Spock, living among the crew of the Starship Enterprise.
When I was in high school, I just couldn't figure out, what the other girls were getting so excited about, all the dating with boys and things like that, swooning over the Beatles. And I used to call their behavior interesting sociological phenomena, or ISPs. And, I just felt like I was an anthropologist on another planet trying to figure out what they were doing. I couldn't figure out why I didn't get along with them. I didn't realize the different ways that people think and that their thoughts are linked with their emotions. I didn't know that.
A recent disaster on the CSU campus gives us a glimpse into how her mind, like Mr. Spock's, separates emotion and reason. 8 inches of rain fell in a matter of hours. The university library flooded out.
We had a tremendous flood here on campus. A meter of water came across campus. The water came in here right under where I'm standing and flooded the basement of the library, and about 100,000 books were totally ruined. Now, some of those journals they can replace, but there was university archives in there. There was Lewis and Clark's original notebooks in there. Some of that stuff, it's gone. Those thoughts are dead. And people are always asking me, well, how do you feel? Well, I'm much more interested in what do I think. And when the library books are ruined, thoughts die. And when the floods came here, I grieved over the loss of the library. I was at the animal science meetings, and I got to look at the front page of the paper that I got at the hotel, and there was wrecked books all over the place, dumped out all over the place. I just couldn't stop crying about that, because it's thoughts that died, and that's why it gets upset about it. I'm crying about this the way most people cry when they lose a person.
So this is something I can very much relate to, and I actually feel like crying too, because books, they are so sacred, and libraries to me are very sacred and safe places. Oh, yeah, I totally understand.
I am autistic.